Hey everybody, this is Blake. I'm reviewing Prometheus. Now this is a movie that I thought was going to be amazing, although in retrospect I'm not sure why. Ridley Scott hasn't directed a great movie in years. The two screenwriters involved are pretty inexperienced when it comes to films, and their best work was probably Cowboys and Aliens, which was entertaining but not particularly well written. And I'm not counting any of their small screen work because that doesn't necessarily translate into good movie making. The Alien franchise has been dead for quite some time, so really, why were my hopes so high? And yeah, this movie was pretty disappointing. It's pretty good, but it's not the great movie I had hoped for. The first thing you need to know is that this is not a horror film, it is not an action film, it is pure science fiction. What does that mean? Well, what was a science fiction movie that came out recently? Men in Black 3. That's not a science fiction film, it is an action comedy that just happened to use science fiction as its setting. Alien was a horror film, but it used science fiction as its setting. These days you don't see too many pure-blooded science fiction films. I think the last one I remember was Moon. It's pretty good, but these days there's just not a whole lot of exposure to those types of films. Now, they were really popular in the 50s, and you'd have the original Day the Earth Stood Still, The Thing from Another Planet, or was it The Thing from Another World? I can never remember the title. And ironically, both of those movies were remade, and they were turned into much more conventional genre pieces, even though I love The Thing, which was the remake of The Thing from Another World. So what is a real science fiction film? They're more just about exploring ideas. They're very dialogue heavy. They focus a lot on social commentary. And there's not a lot of action, but if the dialogue's well written enough, these movies can be pretty compelling. So Prometheus, is it a good science fiction film? It's alright. I mean, it's not great, but it's a very uneven movie. But before I get into that, let's talk about the film's visual style. It's awesome. It's not the vivid, bubblegummy, colorful visual style of Avatar, but it's not that overly wrought, cliched, bleak and grim look of Robin Hood or Daybreakers or Book of Eli, etc., which I think that look has become totally cliched and it's boring. Now, it pretty much recaptures the same look of Alien, and I really like that kind of aesthetic. It's a unique aesthetic, and I like how they balance the post-production and practical effects very well. The CGI is flawless. The set and creature designs are very interesting. I thought Ridley Scott did a good job at keeping things visually fresh. He did great in terms of directing all of this. And what can I say? Oh yeah, the atmosphere is very different though from Alien in that it's pretty much using the same kind of sets and looks. But whereas in Alien they're meant to be kind of scary, this one there's much more. It's meant to be more wondrous. There's a sense of awe going on. The characters are constantly filled with hope whenever they see any of these settings, and it's a very unique and interesting contrast to Alien, and I appreciated that just because it was different. But in terms of script, the movie doesn't really know if it wants to be a conventional movie that's just kind of generic, or if it wants to be very thought-provoking and unique. And you could really tell that this movie really lacked an identity, because it began as an Alien prequel, but then became more its own entity, and that really shows because the movie, it teases too much when it comes to its prequel status, but it doesn't go far enough with it. So really, every time it reminds us of Alien, it's kind of distracting because this movie is dealing with the possible end of the human race, and so the xenomorphs, which are the creatures from Alien, even though there is a possibility that they can become a great threat, they haven't by the end of that franchise. So it's like it just feels too small scale to what's going on here. But just to talk about where this movie really fucks up, for one, the characters, they're all very stereotyped. They're very conventional. You've seen all these characters before. You have the good-natured captain, the bitchy CEO person you're not supposed to like, the spiritual scientist, the cynical scientist, the awkward scientist, the guy who bitches about everything. You've seen this cast before. The only interesting character was David, who was the most fully realized of this entire cast. And but at the same time, the movie does at times seem like it's going to develop these characters, that they're going to become more than their cliche. I was especially hoping this with Charlize Theron's character, who's the CEO bitch. And like at times you're wondering, maybe this character is not as bad as we thought. And, she has good reasons to be the way she is. But as soon as you start thinking that, she pretty much reverts into her old character. And the problem with these types of characters is that you know what they're going to do. You know whether or not they're going to die pretty much long before any of that really happens. So it just makes the movie so conventional because you know all these decisions the characters will make. And so the movie does deserve some credit for at least trying to make them more than just their stereotypes, but it doesn't really succeed. The actors luckily make up for it, and they make the characters interesting. In fact, I will say that I enjoyed the characters just because of the actors who played them, but they're nowhere near as memorable as the cast from Alien or Aliens. I mean, the thing with Alien is that it did a great job at balancing all of its characters, so you couldn't really tell who the main character was. And even though they all had their individual personalities, the movie was really about their journey together. And Aliens, those characters were born within their conventions, but they broke out of that mold. You had characters like Hudson and Gorman who start off as kind of unlikable cowards, but then they become badass and they redeem themselves at the end, so they're not just their cliches. Prometheus, unfortunately, can never achieve that level in terms of how it treats its characters. But then the theology in the film is pretty interesting. I liked the thematic material. I liked the relationship between creators and their creations, and they use that between engineers and humanity, humans and androids, parents and their children. That's the main theme going about here, and I really liked how that was explored. I liked the dialogue that enforced that. And the dialogue in general is pretty interesting. I was never bored. This movie, it's slow, but it's never boring. At least I thought, anyway. And so that was really interesting. But unfortunately, they put so much effort into the thematic material that they forgot to write a coherent script. Now, I'm not expecting too many questions to be answered when it comes to a science fiction film, especially when it comes to the stuff that isn't really supposed to be answered, that's better left to the imagination. But some parts, like, for example, a character commits a betrayal, but they never really explain why. It just seems like such a random addition just to get the plot going, and I always think that's so lazy. In fact, characters do some really stupid things just so the plot can go where it wants to, and that's bad writing, especially considering this one character who does something so incredibly stupid, and it completely goes against what we saw from them before. And that was so frustrating. Also, I think the movie, the horror sequences didn't really feel in place with the rest of the film. It kind of felt like maybe the filmmakers were catering to audience expectations there, so they had to throw in a few scary sequences. And it's sort of a love-hate deal here because these sequences are very well done. Like the first true horror sequence, it is very exciting and very unsettling. And I was totally into it, but at the same time, it just didn't really feel organic to the plot. And so that was kind of weird. In fact, I really wish they just cut out the whole prequel element in general, but what can you do? It was doing such a good job as its own entity, even if it did have a lot of flaws. In fact, now that I think about it, most of my problems with the movie kind of tie in with the film trying to be a horror film. But so which side won out? It depends on you. Some people are going to really like this film's ideas and concepts, and they'll really enjoy the movie based on that, plus the cool visual style, whereas other people will notice more the plot holes, or I don't even know if they really count as plot holes, but the real weird script blunders, and they'll hate the movie. But with me, I notice both sides, and I think where I'm more positive than negative is that this movie is ambitious. It wants to be more than just your typical spectacle. These days, movies have become so shallow. Really, cinema has become such a wasteland when it comes to creativity. Everything is either, it's not even just that everything is a sequel or a remake, is that the scripts in general have become so lazy. Battleship is a movie now. Battleship, that's based off a board game. That's a new low. And I always think of the second Alien vs. Predator movie, where you're really just taking a cliched romance and then having the predators and aliens and the pred-alien kill off all these side characters you don't give a damn about. How is that good screenwriting? And these days, scripts are the least important thing about films. At least that's what the studios seem to think. So the fact that Prometheus put a lot of effort into the screenplay really earned my respect, even if the film didn't always succeed for what it wanted to be. So would I recommend it? Sure, as a matinee, as long as you know what kind of movie you're getting into. If this sounds really boring, I'd say wait till DVD, but I liked it. I'd give it a 3-star or a 7 out of 10, whatever. And so if you want to read my written review, check the link in my description. Follow me on Twitter. Go to my website. If you want to watch part 1 of my Spoonie review, you could find that on my website right now. I'm hopefully going to get part 2 done in the next 2 days, and I will publicly release both videos hopefully within that time too. We'll have to see. So that is that. I'll see you guys later.